I wish I could say I was happy talking to everyone again, but I'm going to be honest. This is the last thing I want to be doing right now. Problem being, who or whatever got a hold of our tech got more of it than we realised, and no more than we thought. Instead of showing up in Corner 7 en masse and turning the tide of the battle, my organisation is being drip-fed into a meat grinder of literal, universal proportions and doing jack shit. We are moving in stutter steps, getting stuck at every stop along the way. 10% of our ground troops are dead. Literal fucking decimation. 1 out of 10 people I've worked with, gone. It's put me in a pretty dark place. All I can do is sit by, watch, and hope the lab rats figure out this situation quick enough that I can do more than die beside my remaining friends. So I thought I'd do what little good I could, by providing some of my unique expertise while I still can. First, for anyone wondering about the mass of medical waste, they were actually kind of the victim in that situation. Got created by some Dr. Frankenstein wannabe, who then thought himself smart enough to go fucking around with the malignant. That didn't go very well for him, and got him killed. Goma Pyle, my name for the blob, was actually trying to pull some John Wick action. But they are not readily built for speed. But this won't be about that story. Actually, it's a great example of why I don't talk about my adventures directly. Most of the time, they turn out like this situation. A long, boring war of iteration that I wouldn't be engaging in if I was going to lose. Not very fun reading. There is one adventure I've been thinking of relating. But I'm going to be honest. Some of you have very amorous attitudes towards entities, which makes me hesitant to tell any story that paints them in a light that could be misconstrued as nice. No. Today, we are talking about a very serious topic. Toys. Not a hot take, but folks tend to overlook these Hasbro-themed oddities when thinking about the kind of things that can truly fuck up your life. Abnormal toys are more than just Chucky and Blade. In fact, the biggest issue with them is their variety. Many people have died hard and slow because they didn't understand exactly what dish at the Terror Buffet they had on their plate. Toys can be broken down into 4 basic categories. As always, there is some overlap, and I can guarantee that there are a few types I'm leaving out. But chances are, if you find yourself missing a limb, or a pet, and a toy is responsible, it'll fall into one of these categories. 1. Cursed toys. 2. Sentient toys. 3. Toys possessing paranormal abilities. 4. Fucking video games. Cursed toys. Lots of objects can be cursed, but cursed toys are kind of a special breed. If we are talking knife, or a cabinet, or a place, there can be a million reasons why someone wants to curse it. Maybe they need to curse a knife to kill an entity, curse a church to summon something, curse a car to give their pet entity a hip ride, whatever. Toys, on the other hand, only get cursed for one reason. Someone is a sad, violent, cruel little arsehole that wants to catch as much trauma as they can without getting caught. A cursed toy is basically the supernatural equivalent of an IED. Touchy, dangerous, and designed in such a way that disabling them is as hard as possible. Depending on how far down the rabbit hole the psycho has created it is, you could be experiencing anything from constant colds to family members dropping dead for no reason. No matter what, you are going to want to take care of this as soon as possible. Half the time, it is as simple as tossing it in the dump or burning the thing. But if the guy or gal who made it knew what they were doing, neither of those is going to be happening. At that point, you have two options. Option 1 is to break the curse. Just like a bomb, your curse is going to have a way to make it inert. This is likely going to be an extremely esoteric task, and unless you're dealing with something at least a few decades old, have fun getting that information in any traditional way. This is the point where I hope you have been paying attention, because your best way is to find an entity willing to help. You see, curses, to them, are nothing, like the entity equivalent of an angry email. Get bad service. Pay with a cursed coin. Friend drank the last soul mead. Leave a cursed glass at his place. Things like that. They have an innate ability to figure them out, pretty much regardless of type. Just don't get ripped off. You're asking for a favour on par with bumming a cigarette, really. Your left arm might seem like a great deal to stop your family members from dying. But if you can find an entity that is that much of an arsehole, you can find one that's a lot nicer. Best plan is to take it to the flea market. Likely, you will find something there that can essentially strip the curse for parts. You walk out with some cash. He gets a great deal. Everyone is happy. Now, option 2 is my preference option in this situation. Find the psychotic bellend that put this thing out in the world and take him or her out of it. You don't want to go picking this option if you aren't equipped, literally, mentally, and physically, for a brawl. Trust me, these types are the trap my house, have a weapon in every room, and a sentient bear trap as a pet kind of people. But if you're armed for bear, it's usually pretty easy to track them down and do the world a big favour. Show no mercy. Remember, these guys basically made a landmine that targeted kids, and if they get the upper hand, you'll know exactly what kind of sick bastard it takes to do that. 2. Sentient toys. I get to give a little good news here. Most sentient toys are essentially to golems what gas station knives are to old hickory. I'm aware that's my second dip into that well, but knife collecting was a hobby before this was my career. If you don't get the reference, I'm talking something that looks very cool, but is impractical as hell. Unlike cursed toys, they won't be immune to anything, and only about as strong as a big grown man. Often, makers put layers of steel and epoxy on the inside. But at the end of the day, once you've removed about 80% of its mass, it's going to collapse into a harmless pile. Have fun with it. Leverage is a wonderful thing. You won't be missing more than a finger in a straight up brawl if you keep your cool. Don't let it run. Don't let it hide. And if it feels pain, use that to figure out who sent it after you or your family. The real problem, though, are rage moths. We don't know where they came from, but they are tiny red and grey moths. Not that you'll ever see it before it's fucking up your Christmas. But their only defining characteristic are the small yellow spines coming from the tips of the wings. They are attracted to very troubled children. If your kid is the type that folks don't want around their pets and babies, be on the lookout. They infest one of the child's toys and start to spin a network of tendons and nerves on the inside. They are as smart as any person and will develop a relationship with the child, often claiming to be the real version of the character depicted in the toy. They then proceed to siphon off the rage, hatred, and mental issues of the child. The kid will go from Rosemary's Baby to Beaver Cleaver in a few months. During this time, the kid will be convinced to hide the toy away from others. The rage moth will use the energy it is taking to grow and become a giant, hideous parody of the toy it infested. The child will be oblivious to the physical changes, only observing the character becoming more life-sized and realistic. What happens next is there hits a point where the moth has absorbed enough of the child's mental trauma that the child is well adjusted enough to no longer want to engage in an increasingly more violent play requested by the rage moth. At this point, the relationship will be one of fear and intimidation by the rage moth, eventually leading to it going on a murderous rampage, starting with the child's family. Likely, you are going to be the parent in this scenario, so I'll try and give you as much advice as I can. Obviously, first piece of advice is to watch out. If your kid fits the profile and suddenly has a turn for the better, be on the lookout. On the flip side, if you both survive this, your child now has a clean bill of mental health. Second, they aren't immune to anything, but they are resilient as hell. Most of their mass is going to be bone, plastic, and tendon. And third, after all is said and done, burn every toy your kid owns. Yes, these things breed. One is bad. A nest, no one is going to survive that. 3. Toys possessing paranormal abilities. These can be a mixed bag. It all really depends on the person who gets a hold of them. We could be talking something as straightforward as a dart gun that fires faster than the speed of light, or as esoteric as a baseball that causes stocks to fall when it is deflated. But in any case, in the wrong hands, they can cause a lot of trouble. Other than the obvious, the biggest issue is they tend to make the owners a little loopy. This isn't much of an issue when we are talking a wand that lets you change something's colour, but the type of changes that occur from, let's say, a toy straw that drinks feelings, that is going to lead to a lot of screws rattling around in someone's skull. You see, humans are not meant to be hip deep in abnormal shit, and even when it is not intended, the background radiation of reality being bent does the human mind no favours. If you find yourself in possession of something like this, my only advice is essentially to have a trip buddy, like when you do mushrooms, someone to tell you that you are okay or need to back off a bit. Unfortunately, if your kid comes across something like this, it's not likely going to be apparent right away. Avoid second-hand stores and garage sales though, and you should be pretty safe. 4. Fucking video games. I'm not anti-video game as a rule, but I can't help but think that if they didn't take off so much, they wouldn't be able to cause so many problems when the supernatural gets involved. Good rule of thumb is that video games are like the modern equivalent of tomes of forbidden knowledge. What I mean by that is, the older it is, the more powerful it will be. They are the perfect medium to sneak in demonic rites, sorcery, entities that live in information, sentient programs, you name it. But it seems that whatever is making decisions in the void seems to have a preference for the Mario era versus the Call of Duty age. do not go searching these things out. I don't care how much of a gamer you are, or how good you follow any of my advice. You do not want to get involved with these things. I cannot stress this enough. Assuming you find yourself involved through no fault of your own, here's about all the information I have. It's not much, but in the same sense, it's kind of like asking someone how to survive a fall out of a commercial airplane. I can raise your odds, but I promise nothing. In most situations, the game is there to facilitate communication with, or allow some kind of entity to affect the world. You are either a radio operator or a battery. Figure out which one. Why would someone be putting something like this in a video game, you might find yourself asking? Besides the reasons above, which basically amount to ease of use, it's often to limit what the entity can communicate or affect. No one goes through the trouble of learning programming, then learning the ins and outs of weaving that with the paranormal, to contact the supernatural equivalent of a gas station clerk. No. Whatever is on the other end of that game doesn't just own the gas station, it owns the oil company. You are going to have to figure out the rules as quickly as you can. Experiment early. Trust me when I say, these games are going to have the highest difficulty curve you have ever seen. The first level is there to lull you into a false sense of security. After that, it is going to be hell. You might get hurt when your character does. Your body could change with the power-ups. Maybe entities from the game show up in your home. Figure it out. If you keep your wits about you and survive, inevitably, you will get in contact with the entity. This could be as simple as a text box, or as complicated as a series of Zener cards equating to specific statements. Don't be afraid to tell it you are in over your head. This thing doesn't want to be dealing with you. It wants to get control of a twisted lab or get some wannabe sorcerer to drain. You are barely worth the effort of eating. It's likely to make a deal with you, usually one task. Always extremely distasteful. I don't care how bad it is, it's going to be better than the alternative. The alternative is always a brutal slog through the rest of the twisted game. See, if you were part of the group who made this, you'd know what to do. You would have been intimately involved in its creation and know exactly what advantages and disadvantages you have, but you are not. You got this from a garage sale or pawn shop, passed from person to person, long since removed from anyone who could play it as intended. Your chances of stumbling through this alive are basically zero. Take the deal. Well, that's about all I have to say on the topic of toys. One more thing before I go though. If you find yourself in a forest in southern Ontario, and you suddenly hear a noise like shifting grass coming from all directions, pick a direction and run. Gomer is personable when he is full, but if he is hungry, all bets are off. Stay safe, and I hope I don't have enough time to talk to you again. Andrew McCray.